going on, everybody? Samuel Akem here, and I'm back with another one. I appreciate you guys for tapping in. I appreciate you guys for continuing to support the channel. Make sure you guys hit that like. Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button right now. Hit the subscribe button right now. Right now. Appreciate you. Now, Big Sky Media Day would have finished by now. I will have been there. I am recording this on Saturday. Basically, I think Media Day, I think it's like the Hall of Fame ceremony tonight. We are getting out there tomorrow on Sunday, and we'll be out there Monday as well. So I'm recording this before Big Sky Media Day, but I'm sure it's going to be a great weekend. I'm sure it was a great weekend. Kind of trying to, speak in, what is that? Past tense, even though it hasn't happened yet. But these videos drop on Tuesday. Media Day is going to be this weekend. It's going to be a great weekend. I'm very, very excited. It's going to be my first Media Day ever. I am, for the first time ever, a credentialed media member. That's super exciting news. I got a really great video for you guys today talking a lot of Big Sky football, trying to stay on FCS football since the season is getting closer. We're talking about that NDSU Colorado game. Again, we're talking about the betting line. A lot of money being put down on that game. I have a short topic about the Power Four and governing body, which could have ramifications for the FCS, so we'll talk a little bit about that. We're going to be talking about Tarleton's home opener against McNeese State. It's going to be on ESPN2. Everybody obviously knows Clifton McDowell is at McNeese State, so I believe they play week 0. That is going to be a very exciting weekend, a very exciting game for people to watch. I know there's going to be a lot of eyes on that game. He was obviously at Montana. We will get into that. I'm going to talk about my top 10 Big Sky games of 2024, the top 10 games that I think people should be keeping their eyes on when the season gets close. Some really good games happening in the Big Sky. How many playoff teams will there be in the Big Sky in 2024? That's another thing I want to talk about, so we'll discuss that. We're going to be talking about the top 10 players in the Big Sky coming into the 2024 season, so please stay tuned for that. Really good players in the Big Sky Conference. Some of the best players in the country play in the Big Sky Conference, so we'll be talking about that. And then, obviously, Big Sky Media Day. I want to tell you guys, please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the like button. It's going to be a great video today. I appreciate you guys for tapping in. Let's get straight into the video. Okay. The NDSU versus Colorado game is getting significant money thrown on it. This is per John Ewing. So obviously I've been talking about this game a ton during the offseason. I think this is going to be a really, really big time game for NDSU and Colorado. Deion Sanders has even made comments about NDSU being on the schedule. We'll talk about that. But let's talk about why this topic came up. Most bet college football games so far this year is North Dakota State, Colorado. Some might say because Deion's there, Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, some of the top players in the country play there. Deion, they're obviously been getting a lot of attention during the offseason. They got a lot of attention last year. They started off the season hot, then waned off towards the back of the end of the season. Defense was atrocious. Offensive line was absolutely atrocious. They hit the transfer portal hard in the spring and in the winter. They're hoping that their offensive line is better. They're really hoping that their defensive line is better as well. I think the back half of their defense was good enough, but I think overall they needed to improve their defense, and they definitely needed to improve their offensive line. They had really good skill players at the receiver position. They obviously have one of the top 2 quarterbacks in the country this year, Shedeur Sanders. I put him at 1, 2, 3 at the lowest, to be honest. I think he's a really, really good player. Really excited to see how he does this year. This will probably be his last season before he goes to the NFL, God willing. So, yeah, I think that's really exciting. They have NDSU. NDSU is a perennial playoff team in the FCS, national championship winner in the FCS. They have a ton of experience beating FBS teams, but they have a ton of experience being very, very good at the FCS level. I believe they could play at the FBS in some of these group of 5 conferences, and I think they could compete at the highest level with some of those schools. But 82% of the money is on Colorado Buffs at -8.5 at BetMGM. That is pretty exciting news right there. Obviously, this is a big-time game going on to start the football season off. Colorado, they better buckle their chin straps. North Dakota State is not a slouch at all. Just go watch the tape. They play hard. They're coached well. good technique. They don't make a lot of mistakes. They're not going to hurt themselves a lot. So you got to bring your A game when you play against a North Dakota State squad. It seems like no matter who they bring in as the head coach, they're always going to be the same. It seems like it doesn't matter what players they bring in. The culture is the culture. The tradition is the tradition. Once you set a culture like that at NDSU, you expect to win. You don't expect to ever lose a game no matter who is in front of you. They don't care who's in front of them. They expect to win. Deion Sanders even had a quote. I saw a quote earlier this week about what Deion Sanders was saying about this game. I'm mad at AD Rick George right now for putting them on the schedule to open up with them. Can you give me a layup? So basically, Deion Sanders is saying he understands what type of program North Dakota State is. He understands what type of success they've had at the FCS level. He fully understands that this is not an easy game. A lot of times when FBS schools schedule an I'm not even going to say an NDSU. When FCS schools schedule, an FCS opponent, they're looking for a tune-up. We don't want to be really challenged. We want to, run our offense, execute at the highest level, get the kinks out of the system in terms of our offensive execution, in terms of our defensive execution, kind of figure out what our identity is going to be potentially if you haven't already figured that out in, the spring or fall sessions. But, those early season games against those FCS opponents, that's where people, they're trying to warm up. They're trying to get ready for the season. You could call that like a preseason game. It still counts on your record, but, NDSU is not a team that you want to schedule for something like that if you're trying to get a tune-up, because they are going to try to give you everything they have. Like I said, the culture is the culture at NDSU. They win. They know that. They understand that. Everybody there understands that. And Deion Sanders understands that. Now, am I saying I think this will be a big-time test for Colorado? Like, if Colorado struggles against NDSU, I think they should be worried about, the rest of their season. But if Colorado rolls NDSU, I think they should feel pretty confident about their season. I don't know what level of competition I would compare NDSU to, because I think they did lose. I mean, they didn't lose a ton of talent, but I don't know. I don't know what to expect from NDSU this year. Obviously, they have one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the FCS, what got probably the top safety in the FCS, and Cole Wisnowski. Pretty good D linemen. I'm not so sure about their linebackers. I know they got some decent running backs. They have pieces. They have a top lineman as well. So I think it's going to be a very interesting game. Like I said, I've talked about this game a lot this offseason. This is one of the games I had circled on my schedule. That line at -8.5, I would take North Dakota State to cover. I would definitely take North Dakota State to cover that. I think they can stay within 9 points, 8 points. I think they can stay within 8 points. I think it'll be a really exciting game. I'm hoping it's a really exciting game. I do think potentially it could be a blowout, but if I understand anything about NDSU, if it's not a blowout, they might lose by maybe a score, which will mean they will cover. So I don't know. Very exciting to see this. It's interesting to see Deion Sanders say that. I'm mad. I'd be interested to see how North Dakota State players are reacting to that. They understand that, maybe we understand that the coach understands. As the players on NDSU squad, they're like, did you see that quote from Deion? You see, he knows. He knows what we're bringing to the table. So that would honestly, as a NDSU player, that would even, fire me up more like, yes, let's go. Let's get this thing going. Either way, what do you guys think about the NDSU game? Do you guys think NDSU Colorado game? Do you guys think Colorado will roll them, or do you think NDSU could give them a run for the money and potentially even win that game? You guys let me know down in the comments, and we will move on. Okay, how the NCAA's proposal to let Power 5 form its own governing body would change all of college sports, per Dennis Dodd. So the quotes that I'm going to read are from an article written by Dennis Dodd. And let's get straight into it. Late last month, NCAA President Charlie Baker presented to the NCAA Council a structure for a separate governing body involving the Power 4 conferences. A person with knowledge of the meeting told CBS Sports. I think I actually reported on this, spoke on this probably a couple of months ago. This is probably in the springtime that I spoke on this. It might have been earlier in the summer that I spoke on this. I know I haven't spoken on it in a couple of weeks, but, the Power 5 conferences, really the Big Ten and the SEC, are big drivers in this movement of trying to split the Power 4 conferences from the rest of the FBS. We've already seen the G5s talk about how they could potentially want to split up. They're getting minimal money from the CFP, if any, and, the SEC and the Big Ten get like a large lump sum of the money coming from the CFP. Those are the teams that usually are winning the championships these days, so no surprise there. But In its rudimentary form at this point, the initiative should be considered one of the most dramatic shifts in the Power Four's desire for more control since autonomy debuted in the months following the 2014 NCAA convention. That began the process towards cost of attendance and gave the then Power Five more legislative leverage. The Power Four could conceivably more efficiently address such issues as transfer portal windows and the recruiting calendar, perhaps even establishing its own enforcement process. So I'm kind of the NCAA would give the Power Fours their power to form their own governing body. So basically, as it stands right now, the NCAA is the only and sole governing body for all of college football. That means they make the rules. I mean, outside of the conferences, they're the ones who sends out the punishments when conferences and schools don't take initiative to do that themselves. This would give them the power to make the rules, make the transfer portal windows, make the recruiting calendar, and even make its own enforcement process. I think that would give the Power Four a lot of power. It will give them a lot of leeway in what they want to do. Obviously, we know the SEC has a ton of power. Obviously, we know the Big Ten has a ton of power. Big 12, ACC have a ton of power as well. Not so much as the SEC and Big Ten. Those guys are, like I said, the big movers, the big drivers in this movement. Short of an actual breakaway by the Power Four, a further separation of Power Four schools from the pack is almost certain. They've already separated themselves financially and in recruiting. And if you pay attention to how things go in recruiting, a lot of the high 4-star, 5-star recruits are usually heading to the SEC. A lot of the high 4-star, 5-star recruits are heading to the Big Ten. Like I said, financially, those are the schools and conferences bringing in the biggest money. You got Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia, LSU. Like, these are some of the schools who bring in a lot of money. These are some of the schools who compete at a high level. Ohio State, Michigan, the the defending national champions. Alabama, Georgia. Georgia was back-to-back a couple of years ago, 2022 and 2023, or 2021 and 2022. So I think this could be very interesting if they're able to form their own governing body. But will now be a reckoning for a subset of those schools within the 68-member Power Four, ACC, Big 10, Big 12, SEC, who will have to make a decision on if they will fully fund revenue sharing resulting from the recent House versus NCAA settlement proposal. So, kind of vague in there with some of the quotes I read. I honestly probably should have put more quotes in there of the article. But basically, this is just a further discussion about the governing body of the of the Power Four schools. They would basically break off from the NCAA. They would have their own governing body. They would have their own revenue share model. They'd be doing everything by themselves, which is honestly probably for the best. A lot of these group of five schools, they can never compete. And that's why the group of five have been talking about separating from the Power Four schools. Now, obviously, TV contracts, money with the CFP that you bring in from the CFP, money that you bring in from these TV contracts from playing against some of those Power Four schools, that plays a part into it. And I talked about this earlier in the year. What does that look like for a group of five school to break away from the Power Four? How much bargaining power do you have when you go to these TV networks and you're not attached to the big Power Four schools? What does that look like when you're going to ask these TV networks for a deal, when you're trying to get big money from them? I mean, what does the competitiveness look like? But then to bring it to the FCS side of things, how does that trickle down and affect the FCS? Does the group of five then overlap the FCS and get the FCS TV deals? Like, I think if the group of five were to break away, if the Power Four were to break away and it would just be group of five, the FCS and group of five, I think, would have to figure something out. There would definitely be some schools who would no longer be FCS. There would definitely be some schools who were, no longer still G5, but I think some G5 schools would have to go up. I think some schools would have to, and the FCS would have to go down. I think it would shake everything up. If the Power Four splits, that's going to shake everything up. That's going to shake all of college sports up. What do the rest of college sports look like? Like, we're only talking about football right now. There's a ton of other sports underneath the NCAA umbrella. What does that look like for them? If the Power Four breaks away, what do scholarships look like? What does rosters look like? Like, what does all that look like? What does NIL look like? There's so many questions to be had. And I think that's some of the things that they're probably discussing right now. They want their own governing body. They want to do their own thing. I think if the NCAA is willing to do it, it just feels like the wild, wild west in NCAA college football these days. It feels like the wild, wild west at every level, especially the Power 4 levels. A lot of these schools are throwing around a lot of money. There's a lot of lawsuits being thrown out there because people are being promised money and they're not being, those promises aren't being committed to. It's just a lot going on in college football. A lot of things are happening. The Power 4 potentially could be looking to split up from the G5s. Or the Power 4, could be looking to split up from the G5s, and that could be very interesting. I'm very interested to see how this works itself out. I don't think we'll get a conclusion to this year. I think potentially next year we could see more changes coming. I think we're seeing a lot of changes. We've seen a lot of changes this offseason. 2-minute, the EA college football game coming back, players getting paid from that. What does that look like? I mean, there's NIL. Schools are now able to have a hand in NIL and how it's being managed with players. That's another change. Helmet communication in college football. There's just a lot. Tablets on the sidelines in college football. There's a lot going on. I still want to know if the tablets on the sidelines are going to be cut-ups or if it's going to be full video, because like I mentioned in the NFL, it's just cut-ups. It's not full video. So that's an interesting intricacy that I would want to know how they're going to. And then also, the way I understand it is like, if one school has helmet communication, does that mean the other school has to have helmet communication? So like, what does that look like for an Alabama? Say an Alabama plays against an FCS opponent. The FCS opponent, say this FCS opponent, a Mercer. Say Alabama plays against Mercer. Say Mercer doesn't have helmet communication. Does that mean Alabama has to forfeit their helmet communication for that game due to the fact that that other school doesn't have it? I don't know, because I think there's something like that in the rules within the NCAA, within college football. I'm not 100% sure, but I feel like something like that exists. Who knows? I think this is going to be really exciting to see how this plays out. Obviously, like I said, I don't think we see an answer from this this year, but I think very soon we could be seeing some answers coming from this. You guys let me know what you guys think about that in the comments, and I will move on. Okay. Tarleton's home opener against McNeese State will now be on ESPN2. Clifton McDowell will be on national television to start the season. The world will be watching. I will most definitely be paying attention to this game. Clifton McDowell obviously transferred from Montana, went to Temple, left Temple, ended up at McNeese State. There were rumors that he was potentially going to end up back at Montana. Everybody was kind of confused in there. He ended up at McNeese State. There was actually an article too that said, I can't remember where it said he was going. I think it was like Prairie View A&M down in Texas. He ended up at McNeese in Louisiana. This is really exciting. There's been a lot of shakeup this offseason with the Clifton McDowell situation. Obviously, Montana fans, which I know a ton of Montana fans follow this channel. Obviously, a ton of Montana fans were very interested in this because he took us to he took Montana to the national championship in 2023, and a lot of people thought, if they can get back there, they can potentially repeat as Big Sky champions, but potentially, finish the job and get a national championship for Montana. Clifton McDowell obviously had different plans in mind. I don't know 100% what it was. Maybe it was coaching staff. Maybe it was NIL. Maybe it was he just thought, he wanted to go up to the FBS level and test his hand there. Whatever it was that led Clifton McDowell to leave, he did leave. It was a big situation. He left he entered the transfer portal they only had a week. Granted, they only had a week. He did enter the transfer portal the next day after the Natty or 2 days after the Natty. So I know that was something that really surprised a lot of people within the Montana stratosphere and the Big Sky world as well. So I know that's something that people are going to be paying attention to. What does that do for what does that say? I don't know. I want to ask a question about if Clifton doesn't play well in this game, what does that mean? What does that mean for them going forward? Is that just a blip? I think this Tarleton team will be pretty decent this year. I think they'll be pretty decent in 2024, so I don't think it's going to be an easy game for McNeese at all. I think McNeese won one game in 2023, so I don't know what their roster looks like. Hopefully they were able to obviously they hit the portal a little bit because they got Clifton McDowell. Hopefully they added some other pieces. I've been seeing some of the players that, he retweets onto the timeline. I see some of the players that they're bringing in. I've been seeing he's been training with his receivers, getting routes in, developing that timing. So hopefully they're working on everything. I know Clifton McDowell is going to have a lot to prove. I love his moxie, his confidence that he brings to the table. I think that's something that led that Montana team down a very, very successful path in 2023. So if he's able to bring that to that McNeese State squad, I think it'll be very good. I was talking to Junior is actually the one who told me this. Can't remember if he told me it in the when I did the interview with him for Good Old Grizzlies, but Junior was talking to me about Clifton McDowell, and he was saying that, you know, it's just his confidence. It permeates through the team. You can all feel it. You know, everybody can feel his confidence when he walks in the locker room. He feels like he's the best player on the field when he's on the field, and you see that, you know, shrugging his shoulders when when defenders run into him. Defenders are trying to intimidate him, get in his face, and he just seems unfazed. I know offensive linemen love that. I felt like that offensive line loved playing for Clifton last year for Montana, and it's going to be very exciting to see how he does what he does and how he's able to empower that McNeese State squad. I'm very excited for this game. I'm very, very excited for this game on national television. It's going to be freaking awesome. Are you guys ready for college football? College football is right here, right now. It's a great time to be alive. It's a great time to be a fan of college football. Great time to be a fan of FCS football. I'm excited. Big time game. I believe that game is in week 0. I'm going to be paying attention to that. What are you guys' thoughts about that McNeese game? Are you guys going to be paying attention? How do you guys think Clifton McDowell will play? What do you guys think of him going to McNeese? Give me your thoughts in the comments, and I will move on. Okay. I want to talk about the top 10 games of 2024, the top 10 Big Sky games of 2024, in no particular order, but these are what I believe are some of the top games happening in the Big Sky in 2024. Games to be paid attention to, games that have playoff implications, games that, you know, could have big time ramifications all the way around. A lot of good players in the Big Sky, like I mentioned towards the beginning of the video, and these are some of the top games that I'm paying attention to, that I will definitely be paying attention to, and I know the rest of the Big Sky fans will be paying attention to as well. At number 1, remember, this is not in any particular order. I'm just naming off my 10. At number 1, obviously, Montana versus Montana State on November 23rd, the last game of the season. The Brawl of the Wild could have playoff and Big Sky implications similar to last year. Whoever won that game was basically going to win the Big Sky. Montana ended up winning that game. Montana won the Big Sky. Montana ended up being, I think, a 2 seed for the playoffs. That's something that helped them get to the FCS National Championship. You know, I think Montana was a really good squad last year, but I think, you know, they had a really, I don't even want to say they had a really good draw, because they played a really good Furman squad. They played a really, really good North Dakota State squad. They would have had to play Montana State again had they beat North Dakota State. And then they played Delaware in the first or second round, whenever that was. So, yeah, I'm very excited about that game. Obviously, like I said, Montana versus Montana State had playoff implications last year, and it had Big Sky implications. So that could potentially be the case this year. I think Montana State will be a really good outfit this year. I think Montana will be a really good outfit as well. So that's the first game to watch. Obviously, everybody in the Big Sky, if you follow the Big Sky, you know that's a game to watch. That's a game to pay attention to. That's a game to keep your eyes on. Number 2, Idaho at Montana State on ESPN2 in October 12th. That's going to be a really, really big time game on national television. Idaho at Montana State. Montana State went to Idaho last year, had some kicking struggles. Idaho was able to come out with a win. I can't remember exactly the final score. I know it was a close game, but I remember, that was a devastating loss for Montana State. Really, really good game. If you paid attention to, it was a really good game. Idaho had a really good squad last year. A lot of people thought Idaho was honestly going to do a little better last year. I think they had a really good running back, really good receiving core, obviously a really good quarterback. I think their offensive line was pretty solid. Their defense was pretty good. I think Idaho was pretty good last year. They weren't able to finish the job, but that's the number 2 game on ESPN2. One of 2 Big Sky games airing on ESPN2 during the regular season next year. So Idaho at Montana State, that's the number 2 game to watch for in 2024. At number 3, we have UC Davis at Montana on ESPN2, the second of 2 nationally televised Big Sky games on November 9th. UC Davis is coming to Montana to play Montana. That's going to be a really exciting game. Land Larison, I can't remember if Land Larison had played when they played Montana last year. I know he got hurt later in the season. I know Montana and UC Davis had played kind of later in the season, but I know that's a big time game on both schedules for Montana and UC Davis. Montana gets UC Davis at home. I can't remember the last time UC Davis came to Montana. I don't remember if they played in 2022. I don't remember if they played in 2023, or they did play in 2023, but they played at UC Davis. I don't think they played in 2022. I don't remember. We did not play them in 2021. 2020, nobody played. 2019, we did play them at UC Davis and beat them. That was actually one of the bigger games in 2019. No. Yeah. That was one of the bigger games in 2019 because they were pretty highly ranked. Montana came in there. Montana came in there and was able to get a dub. But that's a really good game, really big time game on national television. I can't remember the last. I think obviously Montana had a game on ESPN2 during the playoffs. NDSU. I can't remember if Furman was on ESPN2, but I remember Eastern Washington 2021 was on ESPN2 as well. UC Davis at Montana is on ESPN2, a regular season game in Wa Grizz on national television. I think that's going to be very exciting. Going to be some great exposure for Montana and UC Davis. Going to be some great exposure for the Wa Grizz fans and that stadium. It's going to be a really, really great time to be a Big Sky fan. That's number 3 on the list. Number 4, Idaho at UC Davis, September 28th. Idaho, one interesting tidbit for Idaho. Idaho plays 4 of their first 5 on the road, including this UC Davis date. Now, I honestly don't know, and I didn't mention this when I mentioned Idaho at Montana State. I don't know how good Idaho will be this year. Like I mentioned, they lost a lot through the transfer portal. Their number 1 quarterback, their number 1 running back, their number 1 receiver to the draft, their running back and quarterback to the transfer portal. They lost their defensive back. I think their number 1 defensive back left in the transfer portal. So they lost a lot. Obviously, Jason Eck is a hell of a coach, so I think he'll be able to get the boys going. But how much will he be able to get the guys going? That's going to be a really exciting game. Really exciting game. Idaho at UC Davis. Idaho going to California, going to Davis, California to play UC Davis. I honestly would lean towards UC Davis in that game, just given who both teams are returning. But I think Idaho could shock a lot of people. Like I said, I think Jason Eck is a really good coach. That is the number 4 game to watch in 2024 in the Big Sky. Number 5, Montana State at Eastern Washington. Now, I don't know if I would say Eastern Washington and Montana State is like an established rivalry game. Montana State beat the brakes off of Eastern Washington last year. I think they put up like 50 on Eastern Washington potentially last year. But I think that could be a potentially good game. I think their young quarterback, Kiko Avisparis, is going to be a very good player this year. He had some up and down play last year. I think he can throw it all over the place. Obviously, that Eastern Washington offense, they like to air the ball out. Eastern has some good receivers, Efton Chisholm, Nolan Olm. Couple good players for Eastern Washington on the outside at the receiver position to go with Kekoa Visperis. I think that could be a really good game. I could see Eastern Washington winning that. I could see Montana State winning that. Like I said, I think Montana State's going to be one of the better teams in the Big Sky this year. But Eastern Washington, if they're able to get things figured out on the defensive side of things, I think they could be a good outfit in 2024 as well. So that's a game to pay attention to. That game will be played in November towards the end of the season, November 2nd. That is number 5. Number 6 on the list is UC Davis at Sac State. Rivalry game to end the season, could have huge playoff implications, could have huge Big Sky implications, potentially depending on where those schools fall in the Big Sky when that game is played. That game is also played the same weekend as the Brawl of the Wild, November 23rd, last game of the season. Big time game. It's a rivalry game. They're like, I don't know what the distance, they're very close together. Sac and Davis, California are very close schools. Gonna be a big time game. Lan Larison, Caden Bennett, some of the 2 top players for each of those schools. I'll be paying attention to that game. Obviously, the Brawl of the Wild will have a lot of people's attention, but that game as well will have my attention because, like I said, it could have playoff and Big Sky implications similar to the Brawl of the Wild. So that is number 6 on the list. At number 7, we got Sac State at Montana State. Sac State going to Montana State to play on November 9th. Another game towards the end of the season. A lot of these big-time games get played in November. You got UC Davis at Montana in November, Montana State in November. You got Montana State at Eastern Washington in November, UC Davis at Sac State in November, Sac State, Montana State in November. Big-time game for Sac State. I'm not so sure what I think about Sac State so far right now. They lost a really good linebacker, an all-conference linebacker. They lost one of their receivers. They lost an all-conference tight end. And Terrace Marshall? Not Terrace Marshall. Why do I feel like I'm blanking on his name? Marshall. His name is Marshall. Marshall, I'm forgetting his first name. I think a couple of videos ago, I actually called him Terrace Marshall. Terrace Marshall is the receiver from LSU. Marshall. I'm blanking on his name. I have to look it up now. Please give me a second. Marshall Martin, the tight end from Sacramento State, number 16, really good player. Got signed to, I think, the Jets following the draft. Really good player, big time player for Sac State last year. He's no longer there. But Sac State at Montana State, I think that could be a really big game in November. That one could also, obviously all games have playoff and Big Sky implications, but definitely towards the end of the season, in those last 2-3 weeks, those games play big time for playoff standing. So that's a game that I will have my eye on. That was number 7. At number 8, we got Weber State at Montana. Weber State coming into Grizz to play the Grizz. That game will be played in October towards the mid part of the season. Weber State did not have a great season last year. They lost their head coach a couple of years ago, Jay Hill. He had a winning culture. He had set the culture at Weber State. Everybody knew that Weber State was going to be in the running every year when Jay Hill was the head coach. You understood that they were going to have great players. You understood that they were going to play the right way. You understood that they weren't going to make a lot of mistakes. You understood that they were going to play hard from the first snap to the last snap. That's what you could expect from Weber State. They come to Montana to play Montana. The Grizz, I think, are going to be a formidable opponent this year. But I think Weber State could potentially shock some people. They lost some pieces. Everybody, I keep saying teams lose people, but like every school is losing people in the transfer portal these days. So that's not really a surprise. But look for that to be another game to pay attention to have your eyes on in October towards the mid part of the season. That was number 8. At number 9, we have Weber State at Idaho. Weber State going to Idaho to play. Weber State has multiple tough games on the road this season. Definitely towards the back half of the season, Weber State has some tougher games. But Weber State at Idaho. That is a really big time game. Really big time game in November, later in the season, the second to last week of the season, playing at Idaho in the Kippy Dome. Like I said, I don't really know what to expect from either of these squads. Idaho, I think they have a really good quarterback in Lane. I think he's going to be a good player. I think he showed really well against Idaho State. I don't think very highly of that Idaho State had some really good receivers last year, but defensively they weren't a very strong squad. But really good for a freshman to come in and play the way he did, played really well. So hopefully he's able to capitalize off that and bring that into the 2024 season. I believe he's going to be their guy this year unless they brought somebody through the transfer portal. But Weber State at Idaho. Weber State had I think Richie Munoz is their quarterback. I think he was a younger guy last year as well. So we'll see what those two quarterbacks are able to do for Weber State and Idaho with another year of experience under their belt. Last but not least, we have Weber State at Sac State. Weber State, once again, like I said, not so sure what to expect from them coming into the 2024 season. But Sac State, I think they'll be a pretty good squad. Caden Bennett, their quarterback, coming back. They have that Conklin. He was a freshman last year, has another year. I don't know if they'll do the 2-quarterback system, but Caden Bennett can run it. He was like 30 yards from being their leading rush, 30 yards away from being Sac State's leading rusher last year at the quarterback position. Threw for like 2,100 passing yards last year as well. That's not bad at all. So I think that's going to be a really good game to pay attention to. That is number 10 on our list. Weber State at Sac State, going to Sacramento, California to play. Like I said, Weber State's got a lot of tough games on the road in 2024, but that is a game I'll be paying attention to. That is some games that I will be interested in seeing in 2024. You guys let me know if there's a game that I left off. I think I really covered some of the more top games, unless there's some surprises in the conference in terms of who's good in the conference, who's not good in the conference. Maybe some of these teams don't end up being good. Maybe some different teams that I didn't mention end up being really good, like a Portland State, like an NAU potentially. There's some schools out there that could potentially shake things up this year. But these are just based on last year, what I see as being some of the bigger games in the 2024 season. You guys let me know what you guys think about that in the comments, and we will move on. Now, I want to briefly talk about how many playoff teams will the Big Sky have in 2024? Now, the Big Sky is usually a conference that gets quite a few teams into the playoffs every year, one of the better conferences in the FCS. Those teams last year being Montana State, Sac State, and Idaho. Now, I think Montana and Montana State will be two teams that make the playoffs in 2024. I think those are two teams that'll make the playoffs in 2024. UC Davis, Sac State, I think those are two of the other teams that'll make the playoffs in 2024. Now, I mentioned Eastern Washington, Weber State, and Idaho on here as well as three potential teams that I think, but I don't think all three of I don't think the conference can get 7 teams into the playoffs. If they did, that would be absolutely crazy. That would be crazy. I think they get 4 to 5 next year. I'm gonna say 4. I'm gonna say the Big Sky gets 4 teams into the playoffs in 2024, with Eastern Washington, Weber State, Idaho potentially shaking things up and making it a 5th. The one thing that you run into when you think about getting multiple squad, like when you think about getting 4, 5, 6 squads into the playoffs for the Big Sky, is like a lot of these teams play each other. So that means a lot of these teams are going to end up having to beat up on each other. Somebody's got to come out with a dub, depending on how their records look. You know, there could be some interesting records when you look back on their records and see who they play, like see that they had to play against each other. Obviously, the Big Sky is a good conference. Obviously, they're playing really good football in the Big Sky. But you know, what does that look like? What does that look like in 2024? Montana, I think is a. I'm not going to call anybody a lock to make the playoffs because this is college football. Anything could happen on any given Saturday. So I'm not going to say that. But Montana should be a really good squad in 2024. Montana State should be a really good squad in 2024. Sac State should be a decent, above average, I think a good squad in 2024. And I think UC Davis will be a pretty good squad in 2024 as well. Now, Eastern Washington, the reason I put Eastern Washington, Weber State, and Idaho, because those are the schools that I'm like, I don't really know. I don't really know what to expect from them. I don't really know what to expect from Eastern Washington. I think they have good pieces, but defense is always the question for Eastern Washington. Weber State, what do they look like? We know what their history says, but last year, the year before that, I don't think they've been very strong squads. So what does that look like for them? And then Idaho. I think they got a good quarterback. I think they have some pieces, but they lost a ton. So what does that look like? So I could see one of those three getting into the playoffs potentially, and maybe kicking out maybe a Sac State, UC Davis, Montana, or Montana State. Potentially. I could see that happening, but I see safely saying I could see 4 schools getting into the FCS playoffs from the Big Sky Conference in 2024. Portland State could be a sleeper potentially. I know I mentioned them previously when I was talking about some of the top games. I just mentioned them. I didn't talk about any of the games that they had. But Portland State could be a sleeper, but their non-conference schedule can either beat them up and demoralize them, or they could play well and gain some confidence from it. Now, if you watch the video that I recorded a couple of weeks ago, Portland State has a killer of a non-conference schedule. I think they got Washington State, Boise State are 2 FBS opponents that they're playing. And then, you know, they play some playoff teams like UT Martin. They're playing UT Martin, a playoff team. I think they have another playoff team, FCS playoff team in their non-conference schedule. And then their conference schedule is killer as well. So Portland State could either come out on top and be one of the strongest teams coming out of the Big Sky in 2024, or they could struggle, and be one of the worst teams coming out of the Big Sky Conference in 2024. Not coming out. They could be one of the worst teams in the Big Sky Conference in 2024. But they're kind of up in the air. But I see the Big Sky getting 4 teams in the FCS playoffs in 2024. What do you guys think? How many teams could you guys see getting into the FCS playoffs in 2024? You guys let me know in the comments, and I will move on. Top 10 players in the Big Sky coming into the 2024 season. Top 10 players. Now, I know earlier in the offseason I talked about one of the top players from each school in the Big Sky. Obviously, I think there's 12 or 13 teams in the Big Sky. Let me count them real quick. I think there's 12 in the Big Sky. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, 12 teams in the Big Sky in 2024. I'm going to name the top 10 players in no particular order. These are not in order. It's just rambling off the top 10. And at number 1, I'm going to say Junior Bergen of Montana. Star player. Really, I mean, Junior Bergen had a name in the Big Sky Conference and in the FCS prior to 2024, but I think in 2023, prior to 2023, but I think 2023 season was when he really stamped himself as not only an All-American, but one of the top returners in the country, one of the best receivers in the country, really made his place known as one of the best offensive playmakers in FCS college football last year. Really big time player. Get the ball in his hands. He can make things happen. That's number 1 on our list. Number 2 on our list is the do everything quarterback, Tommy Mellott. Can run it. Really good runner of the football. A lot of people, when you talk to a lot of big Bozeman fans, they want him to be healthy. Tommy Mellott is a phenomenal player from Montana State. He has been, he has been a great leader for them, a great player on the field. The only thing that's ever held Tommy Mellott back is his health, and maybe potentially their kicker. But if Tommy Mellott can stay healthy in 2024, if they run him less power, I think the zone read option is his bread and butter, and I think they do it better than anybody in the country. But you gotta keep him upright, you gotta keep him safe. You cannot run him with that quarterback power 10, 15 times a game. You can't do it. You cannot do it. You got to keep him safe. But he's one of the top 10 players in the Big Sky Conference for sure. I don't think anybody would debate that. One of the top 10 players for sure. Somebody to keep your eye on. Number 3 on my list is Elijah Ponder of Cal Poly. 8.5 sacks in 2023. Cal Poly honestly gets lost in the wash. They don't compete at a high level in the Big Sky Conference. They ran the triple option for a very, very long time. They no longer run that triple option. They're now I think like a spread offense team. They actually just lost their quarterback, one of their quarterbacks. I don't know if he was their starter, but Sam Heward entered the transfer portal. I think he actually ended up at Utah maybe from Cal Poly, but really, really good player for Cal Poly, Elijah Ponder. Look for him to potentially be one of the top defensive players, potentially be defensive player of the year in the Big Sky Conference, depending on how he's able to play this year. I don't know how that works with, like, if your team is not good, but you're a really good player, can you still win defensive player of the year? I'd be interested to know. But that's another player. That's number 3 on our list. Number 4 on our list is Mr. Brody Grebe of Montana State. Really dog of a player for Montana State. 9.5 sacks in 2023 for Brody Grebe. I'm looking for him to get over that 10 sack mark in 2023. He will be donning the 41 number, the traditional, the I don't want to call it their legacy number, but that number for Montana State is very important. Number 41. He will be wearing that this year. Being a Montana kid, being a big leader for them, being one of the best players on the team, 9.5 sacks in 2023, that is no easy feat. He's a dog, a very, very good player, very physical, great size, great bend around the edge. I think he's a really good player. I think he's somebody to keep your eyes on. I think he's somebody to pay attention to for the 2024 season. He's definitely one of the top 10 players in the Big Sky Conference. I don't think anybody would dispute that. He's somebody who I think about when I think about how good Montana State could be in the 2024 season. Brody Grebe is somebody who pops into my mind, as well as Tommy Mellott. Somebody to pay attention to for 2024. At number 5 on our list, remember these are in no particular order, just numbering them off. At number 5 on the list is Efton Chisholm of Eastern Washington. He is the top receiving yards leader in the conference from 2023, returning this year for the 2024 season. Now, obviously, you might think of Chaden James, really good player for Idaho State last year. He had 1,000 receiving yards last year. He was the number 1 returner this year he would have been the number 1 returner in terms of yards last year. Efton Chisholm was right under that 1,000-yard mark for 2023. But Efton Chisholm, really, really good player. Been there for a while. I believe he's a senior this year. I remember when he was a young guy wearing number 89 for Eastern Washington when I was still playing for Montana. I think he was making plays back then when he was a young guy. They obviously had some really good receivers ahead of him, but he's definitely learned from all the vets that he played underneath at Eastern Washington, and he's come into his own as a player at Eastern Washington, and he's somebody to pay attention to. He's a dog, really, really good player out of Washington, playing for his home state team, Eastern Washington, one of the home state teams in Eastern Washington, and looking to make his case for one of the top receivers, the top receiver in the Big Sky Conference in 2024. That's number 5 on our list. At number 6, we have Mr. Riley Wilson at Montana. He had 8.5 sacks, similar to Elijah Ponder in 2023. I believe Riley Wilson was a second-team all-conference player. I think he could have snuck into that first team, but there was a lot of good defensive players in the Big Sky. I don't know if it's going to say a ton of good defensive players, but I think Riley Wilson is definitely one of the best rushers in the Big Sky Conference coming into this year. You got Elijah Ponder, you got Brody Grebe. There's good pass rushers in the Big Sky Conference. Riley Wilson is one of those. He's kind of a smaller guy. He's not that prototypical, DN size. He's a little smaller for a DN. He's more so of a linebacker in that 3-3-5 system for Montana, but he's a really good player. He makes plays. He gets around the edge. He's got a lot of speed, good bend around the edge. He makes plays. He's a playmaker for sure. Came in, transferred from Hawaii, I believe, last year to come to Montana. And, he's somebody who really helped Montana's defense be the defense that they were last year, giving up, 17 16, 17, 18 points a game last year, maybe a little more than that. Might have been like 19, 18, 19, but he contributed to making that defense what it was last year. So he's another player to pay attention to in the 2024 season. At number 7, we have Mr. Eli Gilman, the third Montana player on this list. Eli Gilman, one of the better running backs returning in the conference in 2024. He was the Jerry Rice Award winner in 2024. He's looking to capitalize on that this year. He had like 970 rushing yards in 2023, right under that 1,000-yard mark. I know they have a litany of running backs. Stevie Rucker Jr. coming transfer in from Arizona for Montana. You got, why am I blanking on his name? Nick Osmo returning as well. I don't know how many carries Xavier Harris will be getting in 2024. I know he's going to be playing a little slot receiver for the Grizz, but Eli Gilman, really good player for the Grizz, really good running back in the conference, probably one of the top, if not the top running back in the Big Sky Conference returning this year. For Montana, that's the third Montana player on here. He's number 7 on our list, but a really good player nonetheless. Now, my next player at number 8 might surprise some of you guys, but I think he's a really good player, younger player, but somebody who made a name for himself and made himself known last year, and that is Mr. Alex McLaughlin of Northern Arizona, freshman All-American last year, had 4 interceptions in 2023. Really, really good player, young player, looking to capitalize on what he was able to do last year as a freshman and be better in 2024. I think he could end up being one of the top defensive players in the country if he keeps on the trajectory that he did last year. I don't know if I think he's a safety because he had a lot of tackles. I don't know if he had like 70 tackles in 2024. I believe he plays safety for Northern Arizona. I think he was actually their leading tackler last year, as well as their leading, he led them in interceptions last year. He might have led the conference in interceptions actually last year, or tied. He might have tied with like Trevin Gradney, because I think Trevin Gradney might have had 4 as well. But Alex McLaughlin, dog of a player, actually had 2 sacks as well last year. So I think for sure, really, really good player for NAU. Alex McLaughlin, a freshman All-American, to make plays like that, 77 tackles, 4 interceptions, 2 sacks last year, 6 pass breakups. I mean, this dude is flying around all over the place. I think he's somebody to pay attention to coming into the 2024 season. I'm very excited to see how he's able to do in the 2024 season. He comes in at number 8 on our list. Really, really, really good player. At number 9, you have Mr. Lan Larison of UC Davis. He won Big Sky Offensive Player of the Year in 2020. Did he? I believe Lan Larison won Big Sky 2023 Big Sky Offensive Player of the Year. If he wouldn't have won Offensive Player of the Year, I think Montana would have had a sweep with all the awards. They got the Coach of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year. They got Newcomer of the Year. I think Eli Gilman won freshman. Maybe I don't even know if they have a freshman award in the Big Sky. I can't remember all the awards, but I remember Lan Larison shook things up, and that was really big too because Lan Larison didn't even finish the end of the season, and I believe those awards are voted on by the coaches. So that meant that the coaches really understood who he was as a player and what type of impact he made and what kind of difference maker he was. Lan Larison, really good player for UC Davis. He's somebody who I think could have a really good season this year and end up in the NFL playing for somebody next year. He makes plays. He's very versatile. They use him all over the place. But very good player for UC Davis. Somebody to pay attention to for the 2024 season. He is at number 9 on our list. And then at number 10, we have a third Montana State player in Mr. Marcus Weir, probably the top offensive lineman in the FCS. You know, you had a really good stable of linemen at South Dakota State last year. 2 of them are gone. I believe one of them returned for the 2024 season. Now, Marcus Weir becomes that top player, top lineman in the subdivision. I believe North Dakota State has a really good lineman as well on their squad. Falls at about 6'5", 6'6", really good big guy. Marcus Weir, probably the top lineman in the FCS, one of the top linemen in the country. Graded out really high on PFF last year. Might have been one of the highest graded linemen in the country last year. Not might have. I know he was one of the highest graded linemen by PFF last year. He's a really good player. Marcus Weir, Montana State. 3 Montana State players on here. 3 Montana players on here. What do you guys think about this list? Do you guys think I missed anybody? Do you guys think there's obviously there's really good players all over the place. Who do you guys think I missed? Leave me a comment down below. Let me know, and we will move on. Okay, that is going to conclude my video. I just wanted to point out Media Day, like I said at the beginning of the video, Media Day will have been concluded at this point. This video is going to drop on Tuesday, so Media Day would have concluded. I will have been at Media Day with Skyline Sports, Culture Nuanez. This was my first Media Day being a credentialed media member, asking the questions, taking the videos behind the mic, not in front of the mic now. Very exciting time. I'll be credentialed media member for the football season as well, so make sure you guys get at me. Very exciting time, very exciting time. Super excited for football season. Super excited to be working with Culture Nuanez and Skyline Sports. I do understand that earlier in the off season, I mentioned that I was going to be working with FCS Nations Radio. I did make a pivot. I will be working with Skyline Sports now this football season. Culture Nuanez, a guy who bet on me last year before I was really heavy into the media. Culture Nuanez gave me an opportunity, so I decided to stick with Culture Nuanez and Skyline Sports and go with the guys who bet on me first. And that is all I have to say about that. I appreciate you guys so much for tapping into my channel. I appreciate you guys so much for watching the video. I appreciate you guys so much for showing me love. I appreciate you guys so much for just continuing to watch my channel. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please leave me a comment down below of anything you guys want me to cover throughout this football season. Anybody, guys, if you guys, I'm planning on trying to do some interviews, this season as well. I don't know how that'll work with some of the players and some of their time commitments. Obviously, these guys are in school, but I would love to get some player interviews. So if you guys have anybody that you guys really would like to see me talk to, leave that down in the comments. I will get working on that. But I thank you guys for tapping into the channel. Make sure you guys leave a like. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. And I will catch you guys next time. See ya.